At the End of the Road, written by Ruskin Bond. Choose your companions carefully when you are walking in the hills. If you are accompanied by the wrong person, by which I mean someone who is temperamentally very different to you, that long hike you have been dreaming of could well turn into a nightmare. This has happened to me more than once. The first time, many years ago, when I accompanied a businessman friend to the Pindari Glacier in Kumaon. He was in such a hurry to get back to his executive's desk in Delhi that he set off for the glacier as though he had a train to catch, refusing to spend any time admiring the views, looking for birds or animals, or greeting the local inhabitants. By the time we had left the last dak bungalow at Fukaria, I was ready to push him over a cliff. He probably felt the same way about me. On our way down, we met a party of Delhi University boys who were on the same trek. They were doing it in a leisurely, good humored fashion. They were very friendly and asked me to join them. On an impulse, I bid farewell to my previous companion, who was only too glad to dash off downhill where his car was parked at Kapkot, while I made a second ascent to the glacier, this time in better company. Unfortunately, my previous companion had been the one with the funds. My new friends fed me on the way back, and in Nainital, I pawned my watch so that I could have enough for the bus ride back to Delhi. Lesson 2: Always carry enough money with you. Don't depend on a wealthy friend. Of course, it is hard to know who will be a good companion until you have actually hit the road together. Sharing a meal or having a cup of tea together is not the same as tramping along on a dusty road with the water bottle down to its last drop. You can't tell until you have spent a night in the rain or lost the way in the mountains or finished all the food whether both of you have stout hearts and a readiness for the unknown. I like walking alone, but a good companion is well worth finding. He will add to the experience. Pratap was one such companion. He had invited me to spend a fortnight with him in his village above the Nayar river in Pauri Gharwal. In those days, there was no motor road beyond Lansdowne, and one had to walk some 30 miles to get to the village. But first, one had to get to Lansdowne. This involved getting into a train at Dehradun, getting out at Luxor, that is across the Ganga, getting into another train, and then getting out of the train at Najibabad and waiting for a bus to take through the Tarai to Kot Dwara. Najibabad must have been one of the least inspiring places on earth. Hot, dusty, apparently lifeless. We spent 2 hours at the bus stand in the company of several donkeys. We were told that the area had once been the favorite hunting ground of a notorious dacoit, Sultana Daku, whose fortress overlooked the barren plain. I could understand him taking up dacoity. What else was there to do in such a place? And presumed that he looked elsewhere for his loot, for in Najimabad there was nothing worth taking. In due course, he was betrayed and hanged by the British, when they should instead have given him an order of British Empire for stirring up the sleepy countryside. There was a short branch line from Najibabad to Kotdwara, but the train was not leaving that day as the engine driver was unaccountably missing. The bus driver seemed to be missing too, but he did eventually turn up, a little worse for some late night drinking. I could sympathize with him. If in 1940 Najibabad drove you to dacoity, in 1960 it drove you to drink. Kotdwara, a steamy little town in the foothills, was equally depressing. It seemed to lack any sort of character. Here we changed buses and moved into higher regions, and the higher we went, the nicer the surroundings. By the time we reached Lansdowne at 6,000 feet, we were in good spirits. The small hill station was a recruiting center for the Garhwal Rifles and did not cater to tourists. There were no hotels, just a couple of tea stalls where a meal of dal and rice could be obtained. I believe it is much the same 40 years on. Pratap had a friend who was the caretaker of an old little used church, and he bedded us down in the vestry. Early next morning, we set out on our long walk to Pratap's village. I have covered longer distances on foot, but not all in one day. 30 miles of trudging uphill and down and up again, most of it along a footpath that traversed bare hillsides where the hot May sun beat down relentlessly. Here and there we found a little shade and a freshet of spring water which kept us going. But we had neglected to bring food with us apart from a couple of rock hard buns, probably dating back to colonial times, which we had picked up in Lansdowne. We were lucky to meet a farmer who gave us some onions and accompanied us part of the way. Onions for lunch? Nothing better when you are famished. In the West, they say, never talk to strangers. In the East, they say, always talk to strangers. It was this stranger who gave us sustenance on the road, just as strangers had given me company on the way to the Pindar Glacier. On the open road, there are no strangers. You share the same sky, the same mountain, the same sunshine and shade. On the open road, we are all brothers. The stranger went his way and we went ours. Just a few more bends, according to Pratap, always encouraging to the novice plainsman. But I was to be a hillsman by the time we returned to Dehra. Hundreds of just a few more bends before we reached the village. But Pratap was the right sort of companion. He adjusted his pace to suit mine, never lost patience, kept telling me I was a great walker. We arrived at the village just as night fell, and there was his mother waiting for us with a tumbler of milk. Milk? I had always hated the stuff, but that day I was grateful for it and drank 2 glasses. Fortunately, it was cold. There was plenty of milk for me to drink during my 2 week stay in the village. As Pratap's family possessed at least 3 productive cows, the milk was supplemented by thick rotis made from grounded maize, seasonal vegetables, rice, and a species of lentil peculiar to the area and very difficult to digest. Health food friends would have approved of this fare, but it did not agree with me, and I found myself constipated most of the time. The point I am making is that it is always wise to carry your own food on a long hike or treks in the hills. Not that I could have done so. As Pratap's guest, he would have taken it as an insult. By the time I got back to Dehra, after another exhausted trek and more complicated bus and train journeys, I felt quite famished and out of sorts. I bought some eggs and bacon from the grocery across the road from Ashley Hall and made myself a scrumptious breakfast. On another trek from Mussoorie to Chamba, before the motor road came into existence, I put 2 tins of sardines into my knapsack but forgot to take along a can opener. 3 days later, I was back in Dehra, looking very thin indeed and with my sardine tins still intact. That night, I ate the contents of both tins. Reading an account of the same trek undertaken by John Lang about 100 years earlier, I was awestruck by his description of the supplies that he and his friends took with them. Here he is writing in Charles Dickens' magazine Household Words in the issue of January 30, 1858. In front of the clubhouse, our marching establishment had collected, and the 150 coolies were laden with the baggages and stores. There were tents, camp tables, chairs, beds, bedding, boxes of every kind, dozens of cases of wine, ducks, fowls, geese, guns, umbrellas, great coats, and the like. He then goes on to talk of lobsters, oysters, and preserved soaps. I doubt if I would have got very far on such fare. I took the same road in October 1958, a century later, on my own and without provisions except for the aforementioned sardine tins. By dusk, I had reached the village of Kaddakula, where the local shopkeeper put me up for the night. I slept on the floor on a sheepskin infested by fleas. They were all over me as soon as I lay down and found it impossible to sleep. I fled the shop before dawn. Don't go out before daylight, warned my host. There are bears around. But I would sooner have faced a bear than that onslaught from the diligence of the sheepskin. And I reached Chamba in time for an early morning cup of tea. Thank you very much. Pratap had a friend who was the caretaker of an old little used church, and he bedded us down in the vestry. Vestry means a room or building attached to a church used as an office. We were lucky to meet a farmer who gave us some onions and accompanied us part of the way. Onions for lunch? Nothing better when you are famished. Famished means very hungry. By the time I got back to Dehra after another exhausting trek and more complicated bus and train journeys, I felt quite famished and out of sorts. I bought some eggs and bacon rashers from the grocery store across the road from Astley Hall and made myself a scrumptious breakfast. Scrumptious means extremely tasty. On another trek from Mussoorie to Chamba, before the motor road came into existence, I put 2 tins of sardines into my knapsack but forgot to take along a can opener. Sardine means a small fish. Thank you very much.